You ever just finish an anime and then you think to yourself, why did I keep watching after the first episode? Those are my thoughts on Nisekoi. A lot of people say the Nisekoi manga is really good, and I'm sure it is, but I'm not talking about the manga here, I'm talking about the anime. Nisekoi was released not too long ago by Studio Shaft, and let me say outright that Shaft is probably one of my favorite studios, if not my favorite of all time. Let me also say that I really wanted to like Nisekoi. I even rewatched some episodes back to back just so I could see if there were any redeeming qualities I had missed my first way through. But a part of me wasn't too enthused about getting into this in the first place, since Nisekoi is a romantic comedy. I won't go into detail for the sake of ruining a possible future video, but let me just say that a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, there was an anime I saw that quite literally soured my taste in the entire romantic comedy / harem genre, and it's very difficult for me to enjoy anime from that particular genre now. Nisekoi centers around the protagonist Ichijo and his struggles as he's forced to date a girl he has no chemistry with in order to stop two gang factions from warring. Best girl is Onodera. Disagree. Well, you're wrong. The immediate problem that popped up for me while I was watching this was the cliches and how many there were. Don't get me wrong, cliches are fine, just like anything else, so long as it's kept in moderation, and Nisekoi seems to stumble all over the in moderation bit. Opening the episode with two young characters agreeing to marry one another, running to school with toast in your mouth, protagonist running into a transfer student who turns out to be in his classroom. But even I could set aside the cliches, and when I revisited the first episode, there were so many things that left me scratching my head wondering why they had happened. For instance, when Chidege introduces herself to the classroom, she notices Ichijo and she freaks out and they get into an argument. My question would be, why did she react so loudly when she saw Ichijo? She pretty much kneed him in the courtyard and left. She literally saw him in the courtyard for 19 seconds, I counted it, before running off. Even more absurd, at the end of the episode, Ichijo's father explains the situation that the boss of the gang the Yakuza have been warring with is actually his old friend, that they both want to stop fighting. So Ichijo has to pretend to date Chidege. So let me get this straight. The bosses of these two crime families have to force their kids to date in order to trick their gangsters into not fighting. Can somebody tell me why these crime bosses just don't tell their underlings not to fight anymore? I'm pretty sure if you went against the wishes of your gang boss, you'd probably be gutted or have your dick chopped in half. Both Ichijo's father and Chidige's father could have called for a ceasefire, and their gang members would have no right to argue, rather than make up an excuse. There you go, it's broken. The entire setup for the story is retarded and makes no sense.
And you're done. It's elementary.
Remember that anime I mentioned? I feel like the reason it spoiled romantic comedy for me is because it highlighted something so many rom-coms do and something I hate. Indecisiveness. I hate indecisive characters, and Nisekoi has those characters in full. I can understand if a character is unsure what to say, but I can't even begin to count how many scenes there were of characters talking to themselves unsure of what to say, then ending with nothing of substance said. As for the comedy part, the show just tries way too hard, and by the end of each episode I felt like dropping everything and drinking myself into a goddamn coma. The comedy itself isn't bad, but once again, Nisekoi doesn't grasp the concept of keeping these in moderation. Bombastic and loud comedy is funny and all, but the key to making something that's comedic value sits in its overreactions and loud, obnoxious humor is to evenly pace it and make sure it never becomes bothersome to see or hear. But worse than that, the comedy actually harms the romance, something that also happens frequently in rom-coms. I felt like I was wasting my time. Characters have an emotional moment, topped with soft music and even a changing color scheme from time to time. There's a loud and abrupt interruption, then the characters move on with nothing said. Then they tell themselves they'll actually do it next time. Then the next time comes around. Then the same thing happens. Rinse, repeat. Fun fact, happens about 5 times per episode. The same shit loses its charm after a while, and by the end, I was just tired. But aside from that, I wouldn't want anyone thinking Nisekoi is horrible, or, it doesn't have any redeeming qualities. The animation and art style is classic Shaft quality, and it did make some really boring scenes more interesting to look at. Some of the characters are genuinely funny, and there are a few plot twists here and there that I didn't really see coming. The soundtrack is nothing to get excited over, but the openings are actually really good, both performed by the talented Claris. And despite what I said before, there are a few scenes, and even some episodes actually, that had me laughing plenty. The card game scene in episode 9 will always be one of the highlights of the anime for me, I can't deny it. That scene was fucking hilarious. And episode 7 in particular was probably my favorite episode. We had a good emotionally charged sequence, well-timed, and more importantly, well-paced comedy. Plus it introduces one of my favorite characters. It almost seems like a mistake to have such a well-made episode when all the others seem to follow this straightforward pattern of mediocrity. And Raku is actually a pretty down-to-earth protagonist, and I did actually like him, which I don't get to say a lot about harem protagonists. But looking back on it, the entire anime just felt like one big blur, and I can't even count how many times I rolled my eyes. And this is where some people would say something like, just ignore the irrational overreactions of the characters and their completely illogical conclusions and actions. Don't you know? The characters are supposed to have the mental capacity of a fucking walnut, because that's what good writing is. I think the best, worst episode was definitely 11 for this scene.
だから、そのペンダントを初めて見たときは本当にびっくりした。もしかして、一条くんがあの時の男の子なのかと思って。
そうか。だからあの時小野寺は。
たとえそれが10年も前の子供の約束だとしても、その人にとっては大切かもしれないよ。少し違うかも。私は一条くんがその子だったらいいなって。
小野寺、それってどういう。
The episode had such a great setup, great build-up, and just for a minute you actually see genuine romantic progression between Onodera and Raku, and it's all thrown away in a split second. The series' best romantic scene is still turned to shit for the sake of a fucking slapstick joke that nobody fucking cared about.
いや、なかなかないな、欲しくなる写真って。そうだね。
じれったいなこいつら。
Brewery. It's like you can read my mind. One of my favorite characters was actually Marika. She actually managed to move the story along and she was at least direct about her feelings, unlike these other brain-dead morons. The anime actually does have a nice build-up from episode 14 onwards, and it got me excited to see the ending. I wanted to see it all wrap up. I wanted the end to prove to me that the 20 episodes I sat through were meaningless. But I was disappointed again. And I'll admit that the episode was one of the funnier ones and I did enjoy it, but it didn't give me the resolution I so desperately needed. It's just that it's such a poor build-up. They randomly introduce conflict on episode 18 and suddenly it's all serious and shit, which is a complete mockery of the previous episode's tone. And this was the best part of the anime. The Ava reference. 10 out of 10. I would watch this again. I would not watch the anime again. I would watch this scene again. Nisekoi isn't a bad anime. It just reeks of mediocrity and it lacks any emotional weight, and by the end of the anime you feel like the majority of your time was spent wasted watching the same shit. I know Nisekoi Season 2 is coming soon, and to be honest, I don't know if I'm gonna watch it. I might see the last few episodes just to see how it wraps up and see who Raku ends up with.
Onodera.
And maybe if I have nothing to watch, I'll suffer through it. I grew to like a lot of the characters, and like I said, some moments are funny. Would I recommend Nisekoi to a friend? No. No, I wouldn't. Would I recommend Nisekoi to a person who likes harem anime? Sure. But as it stands, a wave of relief washed over me when that 20th episode ended, and I don't think I'll ever be revisited.